on the computer. All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Lynne Constantine, and I'm here with another Thriller Talk Thursday. And today I am lucky to have with me Jenny Milchman and Carla Buckely, two wonderful authors. And I'm going to let each of them introduce themselves a little bit, and then we'll get into some rating talk. So, Jenny, you want to kick us off?
Wouldn't it be funny if Brady Bunch style, like I did Carla's and she did mine, and it would be like that Peter Brady episode on here?
Right.
Okay, I'm Jenny. I'm not Carla. I am a psychological thriller author, and my new book comes out August 18th. I have 4 others. They're all set in the same fictional rural town, and I live in a very not fictional rural town.
That's true.
Is that long enough for an intro? Do you want more? Like my kids?
Hold up. Do you have a galley of your latest book with you?
I totally do. In the basement. That would have been good if I brought it up. Hold on. I'm gonna hold up a bookmark. Can you guys see this?
Hold on.
I have another good bookmark too. Hold on. I have a better bookmark.
That is much better. Yes, The Second Mother. Okay, and just tell us a little quickly what's The Second Mother about?
The Second Mother takes place on this remote, isolated island off the coast of Maine, and Julie Weathers has reasons to flee her old life. She goes and accepts a post as a one-room schoolhouse teacher on this island, and things don't go as planned because it's a Jenny Milchman novel.
There you go. Things probably go badly. All right. And Carla, on to you.
They go badly until, the end, because my novels always end in justice. I'll just get that in there.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yes, Jenny actually has been integral to the process of my current work in progress, and she keeps cautioning me, I want justice. Make sure, I don't care what you do, just make sure you deliver justice at the end. So, okay, Jenny, I'm on it. My name is Carla, and I too am an author of psychological thrillers or suspense novels, although they weren't called that when my first novel came out. That wasn't even a genre. And I like to talk about families, average American families in average American cities, facing terrible crisis, and through the process of confronting those crises, learn about themselves and the depths to which they will go, and then come together in the end, or sometimes not come together in the end. And my latest novel is The Liar's Child, and because I'm hiding in my basement because my husband, thank you COVID-19, is working upstairs, I've got nothing down here but dust bunnies and whatever my kids left before last year. So use your imagination. It's called The Liar's Child, and this one is set on the Outer Banks of North Carolina, which is my current hometown. Well, no, current home state. And it starts with a woman who, under mysterious circumstances, is driven by a couple of U.S. Marshals and dumped in a seedy motel and told to keep her head down. And as her days play out, she begins to be aware of the family next door, a young boy, a young girl, and a mother who goes missing shortly after her arrival. And things go from there.
Okay, so and here's a picture of it for those. Can you guys?
Oh, you're awesome. There it is.
Yes, they both look well. I love them. Yeah. Well, so we call them psychological thrillers, as you said before. They've been around for a long time, right? Before Gone Girl, which I know is sort of considered the seminal book that heralded in this new genre. But I remember. See Jane Run, right? I can't, from a long time ago. And of course, the author's name is eluding me. So these kinds of books actually have been around for a while. Right? They've gained huge popularity. And I'm just wondering, why do you think it is that all of a sudden, or over the past, 10 or so years, people are so enthralled with these types of books? Because really, you see even more authors moving into the genre. What are your thoughts about that? Anybody? Either of you? Both of you?
Well, I was thinking about this earlier today, and I'm always stymied by these questions. I tend to focus on microcosm, but I was struck by the thought that maybe it is an idea whose time was inevitable. And what I'm talking about is you have a generation of women growing up as feminists, beginning to explore the constraints that history has put upon them and finding their own voices and wanting to tell their own stories and feeling that people would want to hear their own stories. So I wonder if that's going on. I'd be really interested in hearing what both of you have to say about that. And that's based on my own experience. I just wrote my story. And when I sold my novel, when my agent told me, well, we don't know what it is, we'll let the publisher decide. And they didn't have a category for it. So this was in 2010. So I'm happy to be embraced by a genre now, but back then it was just getting to its feet. And it sounds so long ago. It wasn't.
It wasn't that long ago. No. I mean, I mean, there was it in what it used to be women's fiction instead of just what fiction now. It seems to me that the tendency was for the perfect protagonist, right? Who had her act together and who looked great and was the perfect size and all of that. Mm-hmm. And all of the sort of flawed woman, which of course we all are, wasn't really the showcase of that. Mm. Now, maybe that person in the book, but that wasn't the main character. The main character was always like really together, and which is so
Nancy
characteristic, right? And so I think I think you're right. I think we're getting to the point where it's like, no, we don't want to read about that. I mean, that's not realistic. We're not looking for that. I mean, sometimes
always wanted to.
Excuse me.
I always wanted to know more about Nancy Drew's sidekicks, right? Didn't you? I mean, they were a little messy. I'd like to.
Right. Yes, exactly. Yeah, which I loved Nancy Drew though too. I have to say. Yeah, no, I think it is. I think it's a more realistic view of life and what's going on, and that whole idea of even the perfect family. There is no such thing as the perfect family, the perfect wife or her husband, right? And it's very interesting looking behind those doors. And Jenny, especially in your work as well, you really look behind that door and uncover those secrets. And how do you feel about that?
Yeah. I mean, I guess so. The author you're talking about was C. Jane Run. That's Joy Fielding, right? And I remember eating hers like candy. I mean,
right.
She just had one after another. And speaking to Carla's point, like what I loved about her heroines was they were all vulnerable in some way. Mm-hmm. And so I think that, George and whoever that was from Nancy Drew, like it was the same. What was her name?
Bess, right? Yeah.
Yeah, Bess.
And
totally.
The fact that I
come up with that. But that was it. Like they had vulnerabilities, and I think the perfect heroine before that. But if you think about this genre, I mean, it's super old, like Rebecca, and we could probably go. I'm sure we could go further back than that. But then I started thinking, because my mind is all fractured, that the point you made, Lynn, about psychology and perfection, like roundabout in the 70s and 80s, we were pulling the gauzy veil back on the perfect family, and we were discovering quite realistically that there was no such thing, and families who were just quiet next door actually had terrible secrets. And this was the era when we began exposing abuse cases and began the child protective system, which ties into The Liar's Child by Carla, really started amping up. And I think that one of the reasons why this psychological thriller suspense genre might have exploded is because we did all start to realize that there's no such thing.
Right.
We all have our skeletons in the closet.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. And so Carla, you're saying that you just wrote what what you were living and what you felt. So it wasn't that you chose a genre. And Jenny, was it the same for you, that this is just these kinds of stories are what draw you and what captures your imagination?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I was working as a psychologist. I was training to be a psychologist. I was working as a psychotherapist. And that's when I wrote my first novel. It didn't get published, but I almost feel like the genre was handed to me. And I'm trying to think of when I was, no is, I guess, is the answer. Like, I remember I was working on this manuscript. It would never get published. Part of that was because it ended up 180,000 words, and I would have sworn that every word was needed.
Right.
And I joined a writer's group. My husband found a writer's group for me, and we were the most motley crew of writers. There was like this like bear of a guy who wrote speculative fiction, and there was this like super goth poet, and there was a housewife, and there was me. And the housewife was reading, we read chapters, we shared chapters, and she was like, this reminds me of Deep End of the Ocean, which had just been chosen as the first Oprah pick. And I remember when she said that, this is going to sound stupid, but to all the emerging writers who are listening, I was not like you. Like when she said that, I was like, I could be a writer. Maybe do books get published? Like they must, because I read books all the time, but I never really thought that like normal people got books published.
Right.
And so that was how the process kicked off for me. And she almost handed me what I was writing by coming up with that as a title. Even though that book obviously wasn't quite as good as Jackie's because it was like 180,000 bloated words.
Oh my gosh. Now the Deep End of the Ocean, that's one where, I don't know, did justice prevail at the end of that? That was a very interesting, right?
Yeah.
I
It was sad. I don't know. All those missed years.
Right? And him, so we're feeling allegiance to that dad who raised him who didn't know anything, but the mother, that was a very haunting story, I thought. But you're right, but there are.
I love those kinds of stories.
You love those what, Carla?
I love those messy kinds of stories. I like.
You do.
I do. I like reading about someone imperfect who has a happy ending, but it's not one she or even he would have picked for themselves, and finding happiness in what ends up. Because I feel that's real life, and to me it's an immersive experience. Then I can relate to the characters, and I can cheer them on, and I can even learn. I can learn a lot from them.
Right.
But I love those kinds of stories. I do.
Yeah.
So you like the ending and the story where the character gets to the life he or she was supposed to live, but not necessarily would have chosen.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And you like the happy endings, Jenny, or you just, I mean, we all like happy endings.
And I feel like I'm a less brave writer in a lot of ways. I like, like if, I mean, nobody has ever said this, no review or anything, but I think my books are a little bit like Disney tales because, I mean, which is weird because there's like cannibalism and really bad stuff that you don't often see in Disney,
but other than that,
but yeah, they're justice plays. They really are. Like, what would life be if we did have more control and pandemics didn't come?
Right, yeah.
And Carla writes about pandemics. So yeah, we're kind of like polar opposite.
Yeah, in fact, Jenny and I have talked about this when we've been on tour together, which is one of my favorite things. But I actually wrote 8 mystery novels, standard traditional mystery novels, before I wrote what turned out to be my debut novel. And for me, for me, the epiphany came because I found that I wasn't really immersed in the story that I was telling. It was more like an exercise. And my first novel was, I don't even want to know how many Jenny, it was massive. And I thought all I had to do was wait 6 months and it would be on the bookstore shelves.
Or the bestseller list.
Of course, right, or on Oprah.
Yeah. Because, I had written it, I had put the time in. Isn't that all you need to do?
Yeah.
Sit down and write. But it wasn't until I connected with a real world happening, which was the possibility of an H5N1 pandemic, that I found the story I was passionate about, that practically wrote itself. That got me.
Yeah, those books, right? That almost write themselves.
I'm sorry.
I said you can always. I feel like those books that almost write themselves are those ones typically that they do the most, as opposed to the ones that you struggle with. But I wanted to ask back to this happy ending justice thing. I feel like there's a trend in literature, not quite as much, more probably television, but moving toward literature where that doesn't always happen. And, it almost is like a necessarily bad ending, which I'm not particularly fond of either. Do you see that? Have you noticed that trend? And what do you guys, I mean, do you think that's something that's just trying to be more arty, or do you think that why do you think we're moving toward that? Because I, like you want to escape in a thriller. You want to get a little scared and nervous, but you want to know that in the end, right, things are going to turn out okay. And now we're not always sure that we are in safe hands anymore, right? When we're reading, I mean, now we know if we're reading a Jenny book or certain authors, you know, you're kind of going to end up like that. So what are your thoughts about this trend?
This keeps me up at night. I'm going to jump in first because it really does keep me up at night, because I feel like I'm kind of lame and like potentially on the wrong side of not history, because I have every belief that there'll be a backlash, but I think you're 100% right, Lynn, in that, you know, I don't know what it's tied to. It's tied to how awful the world is right now and how, you know, fractured we are, and people, I think it could ring false when justice, and I'm oversimplifying my stories. I mean, they're not really, I don't think, like Cinderella, but I do see that trend certainly in TV and, you know, limited series and all that, and Ozark, you know, just not a happy family.
Right.
And I worry about it because I can't, when I'm writing for an escape. I'm writing to feel like if I were as strong as my heroines, I could triumph and I could be victorious. And I don't know how reality-based that is. Like if you threw me into some of my stories, probably I would die in real life, I mean, but not in the books.
But nobody wants to, yeah, no, I mean, I'm with you. I mean, in the same sense, whether it's the psychological thrillers that Valerie and I write, I mean, certainly not every character ends up happy because they're having consequences of their actions, but we do try to make it fair, and we don't want to end one just to be shocking, to have a shocking ending for the sake of that, because I don't, personally, again, I don't find it satisfying. And even in the thrillers that I'm writing as Elsie Shaw, which are the more action, more higher body count, again, you know, there may be some cliffhangers if it's because it's a series, but I'm with you. I don't want evil to prevail. I mean, it might win for a while, but it's like, you know, Star Wars too, right? You don't want the Empire to ultimately win, and then that's the end of the whole thing. It's like, well, wait a minute, what's right? Because we don't know what's going to happen. And so I agree with you that it's a little disconcerting, and, you know, it's making me sometimes, depending on the book I'm reading, want to flip to the back just because I have to know, like, I can't stand the tension. But right, but it didn't used to be like that way. You look at Mary Higgins Clark, who I, you know, loved and would keep me up all night, but you knew ultimately things are going to be okay. So it's interesting that trend is that way. So Carla, you seem to be more in the middle of it. How do you feel about this endings that are maybe not so great? Are you okay?
Well, I agree that evil should not prevail. I wouldn't want to read about evil prevailing, I would read about it, but I would resent it. And, but in the books I write and the books that I read and love, evil's not at the heart. It's human frailty, human weakness. It's nature. It's forces beyond us. And so I'm thinking of Dear Edward. Have either of you read Dear Edward, which is not a thriller? So I'm throwing this title at you, Anne Napolitano. Just run out right now and read that book. But, you know, it starts.
Okay.
Well, the first chapter, I'm not giving anything away, but the first chapter is a plane crash. And you know that all the people on board don't survive, except for one little boy, Dear Edward. And do you really want to read that book? I mean, it takes a certain courage to read something like that, but oh, it's a wonderful book. And it has lots of messy but satisfying endings that you wouldn't say are happy endings, but there's no evil in there, you know? So I think that you can have, I mean, for a thriller, when you're up against and you're serving justice, I think you do have to do that. I mean, you do have to pay homage to that. So Jenny, you keep writing and you're not on the wrong side. I think your reader wants that.
But you touched on something really important, which is that I think randomness is the greatest evil of all.
Right.
Like in my books, where there is often an evil, not an evil person, but a person who really does evil, I think in them, there's a way to sort of work with that person, even if it's sometimes killing that person, that lets good triumph over evil. Whereas a plane crash or a pandemic or whatever it is, you can't argue with that. You can't fight with that. It's a faceless entity. And I think that one of the reasons we read, to get back to your genre question, Lynn, that we love psychological suspense and thrillers, and this whole genre is exploding in so many subgenres, is because it's not just our lives that can take a turn for the whatever, like that, and then just go, haywire. The turn for whatever came for a reason, and then there can be an ordered, arc to the plot. Like, I think we read for that order, and the author imposes it to a degree. Even if they do have a unhappy ending, there's still an order imposed. And real life is what you said.
Well,
it's messy. Those people, they got on the plane. They didn't know that was going to happen. There was no good reason. Like, there's nobody who's like picking June and Jack and Jim to go on that plane because they really need to be in a plane crash that'll top their lives off just like they should have been.
Yeah, no, that's so true. So in this story struggle, talk a little bit about working with editors. As we know, so we write our books and we draft them and we get them to a point, and then we hand them off to our publisher, and then the publisher sends us back a letter with like maybe one or two notes, right? No, like a lot of notes, 40, 50 notes, pages.
Sometimes you need to change a comma.
Right. That's all. So do you ever find yourself struggling, or having a different vision with your editor on a resolution? And if so, how do you resolve that? Is that too undiplomatic a question?
Carla, you want to go first? Because I know we're very antithetical here.
About
like the editing process. Not the fighting with our editors, but the editing process and our feelings.
Not writing process.
You can talk about both. I mean, it's interesting, I think, for both, how you get there, and yeah.
Well, Jenny in terms of the editing process, I work very closely with my editor. She was the same editor on all 5 of my novels. And so there were never any surprises coming from her that I had to quick step. There were some suggestions that I didn't agree with, but it was a very respectful process. And in the end, it was a matter of hearing what she was saying, as well as, if something stops, my feeling is if something stops a reader or your editor or your critique partner, then even if what they're suggesting you do doesn't feel right, the fact that they pointed something out in your manuscript that stopped them, that's what you need to pay attention to.
I would agree.
And
right, figure out another way to do it if you don't agree. Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So Jenny.
So Carla sounds very sane, and probably Lynn would too. And if you were talking, Lynn. So anytime I write a novel, I'm going to tell you all this is God's honest truth. Anytime I write a novel, and it doesn't matter that I've said this now for probably, I think, 14, because I have many unpublished novels. When I am writing it, I believe that I'm writing the world's first perfect first draft. I really believe it. Like, I am reading it, and I'm like, I do think of that about the comma. Like, there's just nothing anybody could find to, no. And then you would think from that, like, I get a little bit of a fall from grace, and no, but they do need some editing. But the irony is that I get so, what'd you say, the letter would have like 1 or 2 points? I have like 2 zillion points in my letter.
I was being
there's so many things. What?
I was being sarcastic about the one.
No, I know, but so sarcastic, like probably you get 20, maybe even 200, 2 zillion. And I've always had, if that's a number, and I've always had 2 editors working on my books, probably because of this perfect first draft delusion. So 2 publishing houses, and I've had 2 editors at each one. And my editors have been brilliant. I mean, really, and the comments they make, they're always right. And when I see them, I'm like, oh, how did I not see that? But it doesn't spare me from each time I'm writing the book being like the 5th time they're not going to be able to find anything. And it's happening now. Like, I'm pretty sure that the book I'm writing now, really, like, I've taken a leap. I've had 4 novels, a 5th coming out. I'm pretty sure this 6th one, it doesn't seem like it could need any edit.
So do you get mad when you see that? When you see the edits, do you get upset?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's lucky my editors aren't in the house, because first I go like, and my husband is actually the first reader, so he really feels this, you know, because I go storming around and I'm like, you're stupid. That comment does not need to be changed. And I have like some really, and then I go, and then it's like 5 stages. Then I get depressed. I'm like, it does need to be changed, but I couldn't possibly do it. I can't do anything. This is the book, you know, and then I slowly like, but I hate the editing process. I mean, I'm high as a kite when I'm writing, but the editing, I'm like, I have to go out there and see if I can change a comma.
Now, I'm the opposite of that. I'm the opposite. I hate writing. I hate it. I love it when I'm done, and then I have someone read it and tell me how to make it into a book. So the voices that Jenny hears as she's writing are absent from my head. I've got the mean old aunt who's sitting there hissing, what are you, that's the wrong grammar. Did no one ever teach you how to spell, give me a word, accessorize? I mean, ooh, that's a tough word.
Wow. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I'm in the middle of.
Lynn, do you? How do you guys, and you have a double whammy because it's you and Val.
So I love the drafting because I am able to suspend that critic during the drafting process. I don't think it's a perfect draft. So like, I know it's not, but I know it can get fixed. So I don't worry about it. And I just, you know, happily go on. I mean, I love it once it starts. I hate starting because before I start, I'm like, ugh, what am I, you know, I don't know what I'm doing. And that I put it off, and I'm not a procrastinator typically, but for that I do. Once I'm into it, and especially when it's really chugging along, I love it. And then, yeah, I hate the editing, and our process has evolved. So it used to be super irritating because we would both be doing like copy edits at the same time, and then we would get on FaceTime and we'd be trying to be telling each other, and I'd be like, where are you? Page 7. I'm like, well, that's not my page 7. And, you know, because we've had a different percentage of Word open, and it was horrible. So now what we do is we take turns. So we go through, like we write separately and edit each other's. But then when the manuscript is ready to be edited, after we've done our developmental editing together, she'll do a copy edit, I'll go do something else. And then she'll send it all to me in track changes. And then I'll go through, take what I like, you know, comment what I don't, and then I'll do a copy edit and send it to her. So, which is nice because trying to sync it up is just crazy. So that's a good thing too, because that way we pick up more errors, right, easily, and it's a lot smoother by the time it gets to our editor. And then when we get our edits back from our editor, we've gotten better. Like the first couple books, same thing. I mean, the F words flying, you know, all of that. Like I, you know, call my agent. Oh my gosh, I can't do all this. And then the next day you look at it and you're like, oh, she's 100% right. You know, totally right on all of it. And so now that we know that,
They always are.
They always are. We just try to like breathe and read the letter over a couple of days and digest it and then dive in and do it. So, you know, this one hasn't been bad. And as you know, like every book is different, right? You have some books where the editor might come back and, I mean, there's always a lot of copy edits, but they might say only a couple issues. And then you have other books where there's like a million of them. So I don't know, but thank God for editors. Right? Imagine what the books would be like without them, except for Jenny's perfect first drafts, of course. But right. So now to go back a little bit, are you guys plotters, or are you writing by the seat, pantsers, writing by the seat of your pants, combination of both? Which?
I don't outline, but I do know, you know, I think Carla and I actually might be a little similar on this. Like I do know, I always know the beginning, and unlike you, Lynn, I love the beginning. Like for me, it's like this cool thing to get, like that first scene I've usually had in my head for quite a while, so I'm just itching to write. And then I might not know what comes next, but the story, you know, I think of the story as a domino row. So if you've got the right domino,
yeah, it's a good analogy. Yeah.
And you push it over, theoretically, you could go all the way through and not, you know, come to a point where you're like, where do I go from here? I've certainly had many books like that where I really didn't know, but when it works the best, I think of it like that. And so I'll know something in the beginning, and I always know that I'm writing toward this ending that is going to have the forces collide and justice win out eventually, but I usually have no idea how.
Right.
Until the end. And, you know,
Right.
Dr. Rose thing about the headlights.
Exactly.
That's far
exactly,
on the road, but that's enough. Like, yeah.
I would agree with that. Yeah, that's what we do as well. Carla, are you the same?
I'm a passionate, and Jenny's heard this, I'm a passionate plotter, and I credit plotting, figuring out how to structure my novel before I start writing it with getting published. And before I was a pantser, I just sat down and I wrote. I had a female firefighter for a while, and then I had a female implosion expert for a while. Then I had a female art historian. And it wasn't until I sat down and said, let's look at the suspense and how this thing is structured. And I hired a guy in my writing group who was a screenwriter to sit down with me and spend 3 hours teaching me how to structure 3-act structure. Now I use a 4-act structure, and I've loosened up. I don't go through and get every chapter down, and I try to aim for a 40 chapter book, but I do know what I call my tent poles. I know my opening scene. I know all the turning points. Every 4 chapters, I know that something has to flip the story. So I line up those as much as I can, because I do like to leave room for the characters to, I've really begun to value that. It's,
Right.
you can only, for me, I can only know so much before I let the characters talk, and let them help me get to a different ending. And sometimes the ending I foresee at the beginning is very unlike the ending that I actually end up with. Well put. When you look, I've been alone in this house for 3.5 months, so
I think we
you
all
guys
sound remarkably coherent. I'm watching this TV show called Alone. Have you guys heard of it?
No.
Where it's like it's called Alone, and it's like the most, I love survival shows.
Someone told me I should watch that.
You know, they're in the Arctic in this season that's on Netflix, and I'm not kidding. Like, one of the guys is just cracking up. Like, he had to eat the squirrel that was his companion, and he's like weeping, and like, I think we're not crying over the squirrels. We're doing good.
Oh my gosh, that sounds horrible. I don't think I can. I'm watching.
To be there or to watch, because watching it is
either one. No,
amazing.
Either is it? Well, I never thought. I'm not much of a reality TV show watcher, but my son kept telling me about 90 Day Fiance. So he got me. Now we're all hooked on that show. Have you seen that yet? The 90 Day Fiance.
Wait, what?
It's on.
Show us that one.
90 Day Fiance. I'm telling you. Yeah.
All right.
It's entertainment for the family, and it's again, it's not. I never.
Okay.
I usually watch all the crime shows, and then for a good crime show, if you haven't watched Defending Jacob, have you seen that one yet?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Watch the last one.
Out.
You've seen
Defending Jacob.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you watched
Did it come out well? Like, do you know if Bill was pleased with it? And
I think he was.
Do you know if it's been a success and true to the book and stuff?
It was true to the book until the very end.
I haven't watched it.
The last show wasn't. In fact, I need to talk to somebody about that, but I guess I can't. I was talking to Lisa.
No, don't spoil it. I'm gonna watch it.
No, you'll like it.
That book is one of my favorite.
Yeah, it was a great book, wasn't it? And again, it was another one that sort of started that genre. All right.
In fact, that Defending Jacob is on my nightstand right now because of the book I'm writing.
Which one is?
Inspired.
Oh, that is. Defending Jacob is on your nightstand. Okay.
Defending Jacob.
So I want to just talk a little bit before we get to our two truths and a lie and end up. You are both huge supporters of writers in the writing community, and so Carla was. Did you debut the ITW debut authors program? Is that what it's called? Yes. So Carla ran that program for how many years for ITW? Right.
I was the third debut chair. I ran it for 2 years, and the entire time I was desperate I loved it, and it was formative, and the friendships that I made in that program are my key friendships to this day. I just can't speak highly enough about the ITW debut program, but I did spend the entire 2 years looking for my replacement, and I found her. And when I found her, I sank my hooks into her as quickly as I could. Didn't I, Jenny?
No, it's great. You invited me, and I didn't know about the program. It was awesome. I mean, I think you're right, Carla. That program was formative for both of us and still is to that day. And it's how Carla and I met, too.
Well, I mean, it's a
And we go
wonderful,
out on book
yeah, I
tours
mean,
together.
I'd like you to talk a little bit about it, because I mean, what I know about it, of course, is it's a great program to help these debut authors to really understand the publishing world and to get some exposure. And I know it's an incredible amount of work on both of your parts, having done it. So can both of you or each of you just talk a little bit about what the program is, and, you know, why you thought it was important, and how, and I know you still actually continue to be, because I know anytime there's a new author, I've sent people your way. I know you've both always been extremely helpful. I know when before I broke in, I mean, Jenny was, one of the first people that helped me as well. So, for any new authors that are, or burgeoning authors that are out there, I think they'd love to hear about it. So kick it off, girls. Which one?
I mean, I think this business, I think the industry side is really hard to get a handle on until you've been inside it, and for a long time even. I mean, I still talk to authors who are on books 2, 3, not just their first books, who are encountering really conundra of situations that they don't know how to handle. And so, and it's even true for me. I mean, I had a conversation with my agent today about film, and we were both sort of like, and could go this way and could go. And so getting those kinds of brass tacks and nuts and bolts, it's just very difficult to do. And ITW has been one of the biggest sources. I also love Sisters in Crime. I also love MWA, but ITW is really like, it's business oriented in a lot of ways, and you can learn from people who are just a little ways ahead, which is very important. Even though it's fun to go to Thriller Fest and talk to Lee Child or Steve Berry or Gail Lynch, whomever it is, better, I think, is to talk to Lynne Constantine or Val or Carla Buckley and really hear, so what do I do after my first novel comes out, and is it good to try to sell my second novel before my first comes out? And that's what I love about the debut program.
And
authors.
Yeah, and the industry is constantly changing. I think, Jenny, in your tenure, you saw things that I never saw.
Yeah.
And I handled things that my predecessors never saw coming.
Right.
And I think that when you're in this fluid and secretive environment where information is held tight, the trending hashtag, publishing paid me, is the first time I've seen people come out and talk about what they have been paid in terms of their advances. But here's this secret club, no, it's not secret, I don't mean to use that word, but here's this club, a group of people who are all starting out and who are all trying to figure out their unique situation. Everybody's different in there. And so you can talk to one another and you can ask those questions you are too embarrassed to ask your agent or your publisher, your editor, and what does this mean? How should I prepare for this? Is this something I need to look for? And that to me is just, it's priceless. It's just a safe place for, new authors to, and because it's nestled within ITW, it's embraced by the authors, the thriller authors of the field, the established leaders who are there to support the debut. It's not just author to author at the new level, but it's also the Jenny Milchmans and the Lynne and Valerie, who have paved their way, reaching down to help the newbies too.
Right.
It's a
when those authors sit on the dais at the debut breakfast and they get their chance to present their book to almost all of Thriller Fest comes to that breakfast.
Right.
I've heard so many people tell me that's one of the high points of their careers, even long after the debut. It's an amazing experience.
It's very moving.
That is. I'm so sad that we're not going to all be together this year in July in New York, but hopefully next year, right? I mean, Thriller Fest is really, the ITW and Thriller Fest it's always the highlight of my year. And, throughout, and it has been an integral part really in mine and Valerie's career as well, just and to your point, Carla, some of my best friends I have made through going to that conference, so I can't wait. Well, I mean, I'm not trying to wish, my mother would say, don't wish your life away. So I'm not going to say, I can't wait till next July, but I'm looking forward to being together again in July, hopefully.
Yeah.
Right. All right. So now we're going to get to the
It doesn't feel like a real year.
It doesn't. No, it doesn't. At least we've got virtual, but no, it's not quite the same. I know I almost feel like doing a mini conference. Like, anybody up for like meeting in New York, you know, those of us who are somewhere, but maybe we can figure something before the end of the year to do. So we're going to close on our 2 truths and a lie. So I'm going to, now I don't know if you guys know each other's truths or lies, because usually what we do is the other people guess. So hopefully not. And then when you post this later,
Oh, really?
people. So, so Jenny, what?
Wait, I have to go to Carla's. I have to call Carla's up. Hold on.
I'm trying to look up mine too.
Okay, you can just recite them if you want. I mean, I usually don't do one, but I'll do some too, since this is, since it's just 2 of, usually there's 4 of us. So my 2 truths and a lie are, number 1, my high school vice principal would call me to give me a wake-up call. Number 2, I once danced on a bar in Greece. And number 3, I homeschooled my twins.
Are we supposed to guess?
Mm-hmm. Which is the lie you have to guess?
The lie.
You homeschooled.
So Carla says the homeschool is the lie. What do you think, Jenny?
Wait, you know what I'm actually thinking? I'm thinking I reversed it. And in case you're about to like throw shade, I do have a reversal issue, like with numbers. I think I might have given you 2 lies and a truth.
I wondered.
You can just, okay.
I reverse things. I'm sorry. It's a, okay. Lynn, my guess is, so we're getting 2 of those are true.
Right.
I feel like the first one. I feel like the Greece thing is true and the homeschooling is true.
Okay. So the Greece thing,
right? No.
Yes, the Greece thing is a lie. I did not dance on a bar in Greece. My friend did, but I did homeschool my twins, and my vice principal, his son was dating a Greek girl. I'm Greek, so he was always very nice to me. And I was coming in late every day, and he was like, "What's going on?" And my mom was taking care of my aunt in Virginia. And I said, my mom's away and my brother doesn't wake me up. So he's like, well, I'll call you and wake you up. So then the next day, my brother's like, Lynn, my principal's on them. What's going on? Like, get up for school. So that became like this big thing in my family. I love then he called me all the time. It was one time, but that carries me to this day. So those are mine. So Jenny, would you just say
cell phone? So that was like a real
call. It was a real phone call, landline to landline. Yes, back in I won't say what decade it was, but quite a while ago. So, all right, who wants to go next?
Hey, do you guys want me to? We can move on to Carla, but do you want me to redo mine with 2 of them being true?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so I have to think of another one right now on the fly. Okay, fine. You go, Carla. I'll be thinking about it.
Okay. A burglar broke into my home and left bloody handprints on the wall. I dated a guy who ended up on To Catch a Predator. Someone stole my identity and lived in Dubai for a while.
Wow. I'm hoping the first one's not true, but I have a feeling it is. I'm going to guess that the person you date did not end up on To Catch a Predator. What do you think, Jen?
I thought that it was the Dubai thing, but maybe I'm wrong.
Which is
it wasn't actually a guy I dated. It was a guy I was married.
Tim was it?
But the lie was the Dubai one.
Oh my, okay, yeah. So somebody that you married and that one.
Tim was into cat.
Hold on. Was he the predator?
This is a whole story. Do you have an hour? Because quick. So I happily married, 3 kids, and I decided to look up the guy that I almost married. And I go onto Google, and it pops up. First thing that pops up, his name's. And I call my sister. I can't even speak. I just said, Google this guy's name. So she Googles it, she sees it, and she says, wow, did you hear a bullet just whistle by your ear? Because yes, indeed, I did.
So why were you Google stalking him before you got married? You're just like, well, let me see what he's doing before I get married. You were already married to your husband when you looked at
it's been like, had been like, Google was a new thing.
No, you want to.
Ish.
Wow.
Wasn't that new?
So was he dating like underage girls, or was that what that show was? Wasn't it To Catch a Predator?
Yeah, and he went to jail. It was ugly.
Wow.
It was ugly. I don't need to hijack this conversation, but
No, but it's very interesting. That sounds like a
wow.
good, short story, maybe.
I could. When I see you at Thriller Fest, we'll have a drink. I'll give you all the details.
Wait, what about the bloody handprint? Where did the blood come from?
Yeah, so that was when I was a child in Bangkok, and the walls of the compound had glass embedded in it to keep intruders out.
So everybody who lived in the houses had to know they couldn't touch their own walls.
Well, you didn't. You weren't. You didn't. You weren't supposed to do that, right?
Wow.
Yeah, that was another time. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to just tweak mine a little bit. Okay, so number one is after college, I took a job on an island and I worked in the schoolhouse as a school teacher in the one-room schoolhouse. Number two is my honeymoon wilderness ended in a disaster. And number three is I worked as a psychotherapist and I treated children who killed.
I think number one is the lie. Well, no,
you think number one's the lie?
Well, maybe three. I think you did treat children, but I don't know if they killed, but I can't remember because I'm cheating a little because I've heard you talking before. But I'm going to go with number one is the lie. What do you think, Carla?
You know how they say on the SAT, go with the first one that comes to you?
Yeah. All right. So number one. Yeah. Carla, what do you think?
Carla, number one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Number one.
So I did want to teach on a one-room schoolhouse, and that's very much where the second mother came from. My husband and I, we had graduated together and we were sort of like, what do we do now? And I was actually enrolled in a master's program, but I was sort of like, I don't know if I want to do that. Although it did lead me to become a writer, but we toyed with the idea, but we never ended up doing it for real.
We did. Go ahead.
We did go on a backcountry honeymoon, and I took out weather related because that's what made it a disaster, but it did end in disaster. We were supposed to be gone for 3 weeks and we only lasted 1 day. And yes, I treated children who killed. That's when I started writing my first suspense novel, because I had this very scary case where I was treating this tiny little, she was this blonde, this Lynne Carla. She was such the cutest little girl, 5 years old, and she had killed the family pet.
Ugh. So was she, obviously sociopath. Do you think there was any chance for her to get better, or
right.
Or was she?
So it's funny. You would think obviously a sociopath, but she was not a sociopath. And treating her ended up developing into I didn't go that far in the career, but I did work for 11 or 12 years in it. Like I didn't advance in terms of prestige or honors or anything, but I developed this kind of specialty in treating children and families who all exemplified this pattern. And it's a very recalcitrant pattern, really hard to undo. But it has nothing to do with sociopathy. And what it is the children were sort of, demonstrating perfectly normal, not that, but earlier precursors of aggression or anger. And the parents could not respond to it in an authentic way. Like I think of it as the everybody gets a trophy, or, okay, buddy, can you stop hitting your sister? Thank you, generation of parents. And the kids would escalate trying to get that authentic connection of emotion from their parents. And in this child's case, it escalated to a crazy degree, but it would happen in much more typical forms where you would just see the kids get into trouble chronically at school. The teacher couldn't control them because the kids were not learning how to control themselves by getting that sort of, this is genuinely bad, cut it out, Billy.
Right.
I'm going to give it a white privileged guy's name.
Is it they're reaching out for attention?
Boundaries, I would say.
Boundaries. Yeah. And boundaries and authentic emotion. Like I did something really sucky. I smacked my sister. I need my mom to be good and angry about this. She doesn't have to beat me. You don't have to sit with a dunce cap in the corner. But I do think we've made a mistake in giving everybody a trophy and, asking them not to do bad things. Kids want that level of the adults are in control still. You know, not when they're 40, but when they're 4.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
So that was her story. And
Wow. Well, it sounds like we have a lot to talk about over drinks next year at Thriller Fest. But thank you both so much for being here. This was great, and we'll look forward to seeing you again, hopefully in person next time. Stay well and safe. Bye, guys.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
thank you, Lynn.
Thank you.
Bye, Carla.